3 bone-chilling true neighbor horror stories that haunt you at midnight. The moon hung low, casting eerie shadows across the once peaceful neighborhood. In this quiet cul-de-sac, where whispers filled the air and lamps flickered like dying stars, the kind of suspenseful tale would unfold that could grip even the boldest heart. It was a night when the veil between reality and the grotesque seemed oh so thin, and the very walls of homes seemed to breathe their secrets. What had once been a friendly wave across the fence now bristled with tension, as 3 chilling tales whispered on the lips of anxious neighbors. First was Mrs. DeLuca, a sweet old lady who had lived there forever, with her dizzying array of garden gnomes that would make anyone wonder just how a neighbor could have so many. But late at night, beyond the gaudy plastic smiles, she would sit in her front yard humming strange tunes, her silver hair glowing under the moonlight. Some swore they heard the gnomes whispering back, their lids flickering. Newcomers often felt a shiver, an inexplicable dread that crept over them like a wool blanket soaked in ice. You could almost feel it, too, an inexplicable tightness in the chest, the air thick with something familiar yet chilling, a slow realization creeping in that something just wasn't right. Then there was the Johnson family. They always kept to themselves, and their house, draped in darkness, was the last on the block to light up at night. Kids dared each other to knock, but no one ever did. One autumn evening, a flicker from the attic window caught the eye of a curious neighbor. Peering through the crack in the curtain, she saw movement like shadows dancing wildly. The kind that sends tremors through you, and a murmur swept among the crowd. Had someone gotten too close? Could the whispers of the gossipy neighborhood lead to danger? Heartbeats raced, but no one was brave enough to investigate. Finally, there was the young couple, fresh from the city, who bought the quaint yellow house on the corner. They seemed perfect, laughter spilling from open windows, the sound of a stereo drifting through the air, but they went silent too suddenly. Days turned into weeks. Where had those carefree sounds gone? The neighbors eyed their door, wondering if anyone would ever come out again. That's when the faint sound began to echo down the street, a low moan that seemed to curl with the wind. It spiraled through the trees, creeping into ears and hearts alike, leaving a lump in throats, a creeping gut instinct that something was terribly wrong. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. As the night stretched on, the whispers grew louder, echoing around the cul-de-sac. Unease turned into panic, every creak felt like a shriek. What secrets lay hidden behind closed doors? Would anyone dare to uncover the truth that loomed just out of sight? The air crackled with tension, and one question lingered in the unnerving silence: what horrors awaited in those seemingly ordinary homes? The air thickened with dread as the night deepened. Shadows danced along creaking fences, and the whispering wind carried an unsettling chill. Every house loomed larger than life, and the flickering light seemed to pulse rhythmically, as if the very heart of the neighborhood was beating in sync with the growing terror. Suddenly, a scream shattered the stillness, breaking the suspense like glass. It came from the Johnson house, the one that always kept to itself. The neighbors, drawn by that raw, haunting cry, exchanged frightened glances, their hearts racing in unison. They gathered, each of them edging closer to the comforting glow of streetlights, but their courage was waning fast. What was that? A voice whispered, trembling in the dark. They all knew they should do something, but the unknown kept them paralyzed. No one dared step foot into the yard where the shadows twisted and turned, hiding whatever fate awaited inside. Chills crept up their spines, igniting panic. Could it be the Johnsons? Had something gone terribly wrong? Glancing towards the gnomes in Mrs. DeLuca's yard, they remembered her late-night humming and the rumors. Were they just tales spun from overactive imaginations? Or was the old lady somehow linked to the darkness surrounding them? As the doubts festered, someone, maybe it was Mark, the youngest in the group gathered the nerve to approach the Johnsons' front door. "I'll check it out," he called, his voice shaking but resolute. "No. Wait." Another neighbor shouted, but Mark was already on the porch, hand hovering over the doorknob. The group held its breath, hearts thunderous in their chests that he turned the knob slowly, every squeak echoing in the night, and the door creaked open. Darkness spilled out, wrapping around him like a suffocating blanket. "Hello?" he called into the void. Silence answered, heavy and thick. The tension built, the fading light from the street barely penetrated the shadows within, the undeniable stench of decay hit him as he stepped inside. Something utterly wrong lingered in the air, weaving its way into his senses and quickening his pulse. The room was cluttered, resembling a scene abandoned in haste, but there was movement at the end of the hallway. Mark squinted into the darkness, unsure whether his eyes were deceiving him as they adjusted. Shadows flickered again, more pronounced this time. Something was there lurking, watching. He felt an urgent tug at his instinct to flee, but a morbid curiosity pulled him deeper into the abyss of the house. Just then, a fierce shriek pierced through the gloom, a sound not of fear but of pure agony. It was unmistakable, and it echoed with a depth of despair that made the walls tremble. Mark stumbled backward, heart pounding in terror. The neighbors outside exchanged panicked glances, catching wisps of whispers that floated like specters around them. "We shouldn't be here," one murmured, but the weight of collective fear held them in place. Then, as if on cue, a figure dashed past the attic window, silhouetted against the pale moonlight. Another piercing scream rang out, and suddenly, the air exploded with chaos. Through the chaos, someone shouted, "We have to go. We can't stay here." But just as their feet began to turn, the front door of the Johnson house slammed shut, trapping Mark inside. The chill deepened, biting at their resolve. What had they unleashed? As they watched the house spiral into darkness, that low moan seeped into the night again, vibrating through their bones like a cruel warning. What was happening inside? And what had they just awakened? The moment of truth was at hand, but a more chilling thought loomed overhead: what if they were next? A crushing silence held its breath around the cul-de-sac. And then, a single light flickered on in Mrs. DeLuca's yard. The light in Mrs. DeLuca's yard blazed to life, casting eerie shadows that twisted across the pavement. It felt like a beacon amid an overwhelming storm of uncertainty. The neighbors leaned forward, squinting into the light. What would they see? Then, the light flickered and faltered, almost as if it faltered under the weight of despair that hung in the air. Eyes darted nervously, a few stepped back, as though the glow tethered them to some unseen horror. "Should we go to her?" someone whispered, the anxiety palpable in their voice. But nobody moved. Mark's voice lured them inward, resonating through the heavy atmosphere of tension. "Hello." His call pierced the silence, but it brought no comfort, only the weight of dread that wrapped around them tighter. Then came another shriek, louder and filled with raw terror, that echoed from within the Johnson house, a sound that reminded them of their own mortality. It was like nails scraping against glass, sending shivers rippling through their spines. "What are we doing?" a woman cried, her eyes wide with disbelief. "This isn't right." The others exchanged frantic glances, uncertainty freezing them in place. Finally, someone made the decision. Mark's best friend, Jake, surging with adrenaline, stepped forward. "We can't just leave him. He's in there." With newfound determination, he stepped toward the Johnsons' dark entryway. The fear laced with courage ignited a flicker of hope that crept through the group. "We have to go in after him," he declared. But as he crossed the threshold, the door behind him slammed shut, the thud resonating like thunder in the night air. Jake's heart raced. What held Mark was hidden in that oppressive darkness, and now he was just as ensnared. Within, the swirling shadows took on menacing shapes. Jake gulped hard, the stench of decay creeping uncomfortably close. "Mark!" he shouted, his voice wavering as terror clutched his throat. For a moment, silence engulfed him, then a muffled whimper broke through the air. It twisted in Jake's stomach, and sheer panic propelled him deeper into the house. The corridor loomed long and dark, each step heavier than the last, filled with the sense of being watched. Outside, the group huddled together, whispers erupting between them, each heart racing with conflicting emotions. Fear. Guilt. Self-preservation. They were helpless, rooted to the spot, trembling in anticipation of what might materialize from that hellish abode. Suddenly, the window rattled, sending a shockwave through the crowd. They turned as the attic window burst open, chaos spilling from above. An arm, pale and trembling, emerged from the shadows, clawing at the air, desperate for escape. Help! It was Mark's voice, tinged with molten fear. Then, just as quickly, the arm dropped, limp, as the attic window slammed shut. A chilling gust swept through the air, sending leaves spiraling into the crowd and leaving hearts pounding amid the silence. Then the light from Mrs. DeLuca's yard flickered once more, dimming, and the terrifying thought slithered into the minds of the neighbors: was this a signal of warning? What if the same fate awaited them? In that very moment, a low growl rumbled from the depths of the Johnson house, reverberating like a death knell in the night. What is happening? Someone gasped, eyes widening in disbelief. Something shifted in the darkened doorway. A shadow emerged, unfolding slowly, revealing a figure cloaked in the remnants of night. Its eyes glowed with a haunting intensity. They were frozen, breaths hitching in their throats. And then, from the depths of that dreadful silence, the figure spoke. "You should have left while you could." The words slipped softly into the void, leaving a trail of dread coursing through their veins. What had they awakened? As the winds howled through the quiet streets, uncertainty wrapped around them like a noose, one that was slowly tightening. The pulse of fear quickened. Behind the figure, the echoes of a distant scream resonated, melding into an impressive symphony of chaos within the Johnson house. And then, another scream cut through the air, this one unmistakably belonging to Mrs. DeLuca. What dark secret intertwined her fate with the Johnsons? And how far would they go to uncover the truth? The figure stood motionless, its eyes gleaming like shards of glass, reflecting the fright that spread through the huddled neighbors. The disturbing silence that followed felt thick and suffocating, pressed down by layers of unspeakable fear. "What do you mean?" A brave voice finally quizzed, breaking the paralyzing spell that had seized the crowd. It was Lisa, a local teacher with a knack for wrangling the restless spirits of her students. Now, confronted by this monstrosity, her words trembled like leaves in a gale. The figure shifted slightly, almost in amusement. "You've disturbed more than just the night. You've awakened the past. And the past doesn't forget." With that, the air grew colder, a chilling breeze sweeping through the crowd. A few neighbors instinctively stepped back, their fear palpable. "Do you hear that?" someone whispered, breaking the uneasy silence. The distant sounds of skittering, like tiny nails on wood, wafted from the Johnson house. It was disorienting, a sinister lullaby beckoning them closer. "Maybe we should call the police," another neighbor suggested, her voice shaky yet hopeful. But who would answer? Who would dare show up in a situation like this? They all knew the last time the police were called to the Johnsons, it ended in a fib and a hushed warning to keep things quiet. The thought sent a shudder through the group. Inside the house, Jake stumbled forward, tripping over a phantom dream that held the weight of sorrow. "Mark!" echoed his voice, but it was swallowed up by the darkness. Each call was met with an unsettling quiet, as though the house itself was hanging on his every word. He crept further inside, feeling the walls close in like the jaws of some feral beast. The growls grew louder now, mingling with the echoes of Mark's cries. A creeping dread filled Jake, wrapping around him like a heavy fog. A faint light flickered ahead, pulsing as if alive, mocking his cowardice. Suddenly, he halted. The growling had transformed into laughter, deep, resonant, menacing. "Jake," a whisper slithered through the air, curling around his name like a serpent. It wrapped itself around his heart, constricting tighter until he could barely breathe. "Mark? Is that you?" Jake's voice cracked, a fragment of hope battling the icy grip of terror. The laughter intensified, now joined by a chorus of whispers that seemed to rise from every corner. "Come play with us." Meanwhile, outside, the neighbors exchanged glances filled with horror, the figure still watching, its eyes unreadable. "What took place inside this house could consume you," it murmured menacingly. A sob erupted from Mrs. DeLuca, who suddenly lurched forward, chasing shadows that danced in the moonlight. "Mark! Please! Don't leave us!" The spirit before them seemed to lean in closer, as if savoring their anguish. "You'll bear witness to the truth tonight. The truth of tragedy woven within families, the ties that bind and consume. Once revealed, there is no turning back." Just then, the scream returned, ringing louder and more desperate, an urgent plea that dripped with despair. In that moment, the dreaded realization washed over each neighbor: they had a choice to make: stay in horror to uncover what awaited within the Johnson house, or flee into the night, leaving Mark and Jake to unearth the terror alone. But freezing fear held them captive. What lay in wait was more than just secrets. It was an awakening. As the shadows stretched and thinned, illuminating the path with a ghostly glow, the neighbors found themselves teetering on the brink of a revelation. And then silence. What must they sacrifice to discover the horrific truth waiting inside? Would they act, or would they cower in the face of the unknown? The dread hung thick in the air, tightening its grip with every passing second. The horror was just beginning. Jake's heart pounded like a war drum as he pressed further into the abyss of the Johnson house, each step echoing ominously in the stillness. The laughter surrounded him, rippling through the shadowed corners like a living thing. "What do you want?" he gasped, his voice barely breaking above the din of madness. The light flickered again, pulsing with a frantic rhythm. Shadows danced along the walls, twisting with urgent energy as if begging to escape. "Come play with us." The whispers curled around him, a sickly sweet invitation that sent chills dancing down his spine. Outside, the neighbors stood like statues, too afraid to move. Each face twisted in fear and disbelief as Mrs. DeLuca kept crying for Mark. "We can't just stand here," Lisa finally shouted, her bravery carried on a wave of desperation. "We need to help them." "Help them?" someone scoffed, the voice quaking with defiance. "We can't even help ourselves." The crowd murmured in agreement, voices fluctuating between panic and paralysis. But Lisa's gaze remained locked on the figure, its glassy eyes watching with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "What happened here?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the quaking terror inside her. The figure tilted its head, and a smile, if it could be called that, spread across its face. "You think you're ready for the answers? They come with a price." A rush of wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of decay. It was the smell of old regret, of stories etched in sorrow and woven into the fabric of the house itself. Jake gasped as he stumbled upon a torn photograph on the dusty floor, half buried beneath the shattered remnants of furniture. It was a picture of a family, once vibrant, now reduced to shades of gray. "Mark!" he shouted, suddenly desperate. He felt that he might be on the brink of something crucial. But laughter echoed through the halls once more, mocking him, and with it came the sound of something crawling, moving in the darkness, a mass of distorted limbs and gnarled faces that churned and writhed. It was as if the past was clawing its way back, an army of grief and anger stacked high within these walls. Outside, the neighbors couldn't take it anymore. "We need to do something." The tension thickened until it was almost suffocating, and yet, somehow, they hesitated. What if the truths revealed were more harrowing than anything they could bear? "Look!" someone shouted, pointing back toward the house, and they all turned as shadows seemed to coalesce in the doorway, forming a figure much larger than the last. It was a silhouette of a man, his hands outstretched, almost as if offering salvation or a final farewell. Inside, Jake stood transfixed. "Mark, please answer me." He couldn't shake the feeling that the house itself was holding on to something vital, something that wanted to be set free. Suddenly, the floorboards creaked ominously as the shadowy figure lurched forward. "The games have begun, Jake. Will you play with us?" It began to fade, drawing the light around it like moths to a flame, allowing a ghastly laughter to echo in its wake. With a harsh gasp, Jake fell back, landing hard on the cold wooden floor. The whispers grew into a chaotic crescendo around him. "What is happening?" Outside, Lisa's heart raced as she made up her mind. "We have to go in. We can't leave them." But as she stepped forward, fear gripped her. The air thickened with something unseen, heavy and suffocating, and the figure raised its hand as if to summon forth a storm. Each breath caught in their throats, heavy with indecision. With every moment, dread spiraled tighter around them. It was a choice between facing haunting truths or fleeing into oblivion. What darkness awaited them within? Would they be the keepers of secrets or the bringers of light? The shadows shifted, and the unseen past seemed to wait for their next move. Time hung suspended like a broken pendulum, ticking towards an inevitable confrontation. What would they risk to uncover the truth? And would they still be themselves after confronting the horror lying in wait just inside that threshold? The moment of truth had arrived, hanging in the air like thick fog as the shadows writhed and seethed. Jake's heart raced against the confines of his chest. He could feel the weight of every eye in the room, the whispers in his ears growing louder. "Mark!" He shouted again, desperation flooding his voice. What if there was no answer? In the corner of the room, the large figure loomed, pulling tighter the veil of darkness that surrounded it. It felt like a monstrous contraction of fear, tightening the space around Jake until he could barely breathe. He pushed himself back against the wall, eyes widening, searching for an escape. "Why are you hiding, Jake?" "We just want to play," the voice echoed, mocking him. It was unsettling, as though the very walls were alive, each crevice filled with the long-buried sorrows of the Johnson family. Outside, Lisa stood resolute, defiance etched across every feature. "You can't do this, let them go." She stepped forward, her voice rising above the chaos. The neighbors looked on, caught between needing to act and the gut-wrenching fear wrapped around them like a shroud. Inside, Jake eyed the shadows creeping closer. It felt as if they were a living entity, hungry for his fear. The laughter grew louder, reverberating through the air like a sinister melody. He could hear the echoes of the past, a cacophony of voices merging into one, screams entwined with laughter, both frantic and hollow. That he clenched his fists, willing the courage to push through. "I'm not afraid of you. Where's Mark?" The challenge hung in the air, thick with uncertainty. With a shuddering wave, the darkness began to recede, revealing the room in stark relief. Here, amid the peeling wallpaper and broken furniture, he saw glimpses of what had once been a child's toy, vibrant against the decay, a smile frozen in a photograph now dull and worn. Mark's face flashed in his mind, a fleeting memory. Suddenly, from the darkness, a low, guttural growl emerged. It swelled, vibrating through the wooden beams as if the house itself were protesting. "We're still here. You can't run from us." The voices, distorted and layered, surged forward, merging into one guttural roar. Jake ducked as a shadow lunged. He stumbled backward, instinct kicking in. "Stay away." He felt the cold sweat trickle down his back, his mind racing through the gruesome possibilities. The photos, the whispers, they were all a plea, a warning. Outside, Lisa pressed against the threshold, her courage hanging by a thread. "We can't leave them," she cried, but a ripple of terror coursed through the crowd. They knew the risks that lay before them. The darkness was powerful, and it craved their fear. As the house groaned, a door slammed somewhere in the distance, cutting through the tension momentarily. The laughter subsided, replaced by an almost palpable silence. In that moment, a flicker of hope ignited within Jake. Could he find the strength to confront this evil? Could truth set them free? "Mark! I won't stop until I find you," he shouted, more to himself than anyone else. The shadows recoiled, swirling in chaotic patterns, uncertain now. And then, from the depths of the darkness, emerged a whisper, so soft yet spine-chilling. "The truth is buried deep below the stairs." A sinking feeling hit his stomach. Below the stairs? Was that where Mark had gone? A path opened before him, a dark invitation to delve deeper into the unknown. Jake knew he was at a crossroads. Would he side with the whispers that promised answers, or would he allow fear to govern his choices? He turned to Lisa, his heart pounding with the weight of his decision. "We have to go down there." Outside, the neighbors exchanged anxious glances, the tension thick as they too felt the pull of the impending doom. Would they join Lisa and Jake, or would they lose themselves to fear? As the shadows danced once more, closing in around Jake, he took a deep breath and steeled himself. The house held its secrets close, but he would force them into the light. But would the truth be worth the price? The shadows shifted and seemed to beckon him. What awaited in the darkness below? Secrets, truths, or something far worse? Jake took a step forward, propelled by a mixture of fear and determination. The walls of the house whispered, their tones layered with a chilling nostalgia. He felt the urge to turn back, to run into the light outside where Lisa stood, but the bonds of duty and love for his brother tightened around his heart. "Let us go," he said to Lisa, his voice a low, trembling whisper. She nodded, her eyes wide but resolute, reminding him of why they had to face the darkness together. They moved toward the staircase, each step sending an echo through the empty halls, as if the house was counting down the moments until they ventured into the molasses-thick shadow below. Goosebumps crawled up Jake's arms as he knelt to examine the area beneath the stairs, almost afraid of what he might find. Dust motes hung in the air, lit by the faint light that managed to penetrate the inky blackness. The air felt electric, charged with unspeakable energy. Jake swore he could hear fragments of conversations rising from the shadows, like anguished cries that reached out for his attention. "Mark! Where are you?" He called again, the words tumbling into the void that filled the space beneath the stairs. In the silence that followed, Jake heard a faint rustling, followed by an eerie, childlike giggle that sent chills racing down his spine. "Mark!" Jake called again, forcing his voice, fighting the tremor that threatened to betray his resolve. Suddenly, the darkness at the base of the stairs parted like a curtain, revealing a narrow passage that sloped downward almost invitingly. Its stone steps were slick, as if coated in years of neglect and despair. Each footfall echoed ominously, reverberating with their terror. They descended, one step at a time, into the heart of the house. The walls around them seemed to pulse with a life of their own, shadows clinging and shifting, as if trying to conceal secrets. The air grew colder, a gust of wind swirling around them, whispering sounds just out of reach like lost memories. At the bottom, they emerged into a small room. Dim light spilled in from a cracked window, casting long shadows across the floor. It looked like a child's playroom, but time had corroded its innocence. Broken toys lay scattered, and the wallpaper peeled back like ancient skin. In the center was a small table, an old board game abandoned mid-play. "Look!" Lisa pointed, her voice shaking slightly. On the wall hung a faded photograph, crinkled and stained. In it sat a family resembling the Johnsons, their smiles cheerful and innocent. In the corners, however, shadows gathered like smoke, twisting and turning as if struggling for escape. Jake stepped closer, studying the picture, feeling an odd sense of familiarity rush over him. Recognizing the place stirred something deep within him. But just as understanding flickered in his mind, the shadows surged forward again, swirling around them with intent. "Get back!" Jake shouted, instinctively placing himself between the encroaching darkness and Lisa. But even as he cried out, he felt the shadows claw at his skin, tingling like ice. "Jake, look!" Lisa gasped, pointing at the floor. There, just below the table, was a trapdoor that was barely visible beneath the layers of dust. Jake's heart raced. Mark had to be there. Could he truly be buried beneath the floors of this haunted house? With shaking hands, Jake bent down and gripped the edges, ready to pull it open. But something was off. A vibration, a pulsing sensation thrumming through the air. It felt as if the house itself was warning him. The shadows shrieked, a menacing symphony as if disapproving of their next moves. "Jake!" Lisa urged, her voice strained, "We need to go back. We don't know what's down there. But the pull of the truth was magnetic, overpowering his fears. No. I have to know. He could already imagine Mark's face, lost and scared. With one swift motion, he yanked the door open. The abyss yawned below them, dark and menacing. From it, a cold gust swept up, carrying with it the stench of decay and years of neglect. Jake leaned in, peering into the depths of the darkness, his breath caught in his throat. Mark! He called, hope mingling with panic as he prepared to descend further into the unknown, but then, beneath the resonating silence, came a heart-stopping sound, the unmistakable clatter of small feet rushing toward him from the depths below. Was it Mark? Or something else, something waiting to feast on their fear? What sinister secrets would the darkness unveil next? The sound came again, clear and hurried, echoing off the damp walls of the small room. Jake's heart thundered in his chest, a furious drumbeat of fear and desperation. Mark? He called again, but this time his voice cracked, uncertainty creeping in. Jake, this isn't right. Lisa's voice trembled behind him, a thin veil of terror covering her words. She tugged at his arm, a silent plea for him to pull back, to retreat into the safety of the light above, but he couldn't. He wouldn't. The pit in his stomach churned like a storm. Mark needed him, and he couldn't let fear paralyze him now. Stay close, he whispered, gripping the edge of the trapdoor tighter. He felt a rush of icy air pour from the opening, almost as if the darkness were inviting him in. Go back, don't, Lisa started, but was interrupted by another noise, a giggle, this time sharper, more unnerving. It sounded too close. Jake's breath hitched as he crouched lower, peering into the void below. The tiny pinprick of light from the room barely penetrated the murkiness. Just a little further, he murmured. He swung a leg over the edge, felt the cool air brush against his skin like icy fingers. The moment his foot touched the first step, the shadows coalesced into thicker, more palpable darkness. A sense of dread washed over him like a tidal wave. Wait! Jake, please! With Lisa's pleas ringing in his ears, he hesitated. His heart raced, a combat between love and duty, sanity and madness. He could hear whispers swirling around him, unintelligible but charged with malice. They were beckoning him deeper, urging him to enter the shadows. Mark! He shouted, determination rising like a flame within him. And then he saw it, a flicker of movement just beyond the reach of the dim light. It darted behind a wall, swift and silent. Come on! Jake urged Lisa, as he took another step down. The cold seeped into his bones, an oppressive weight wrapping around him. As he descended, Lisa grabbed his arm tightly. We should really get out of here. But another giggle echoed through the passage, as if it were teasing him, challenging him to go further. I can't leave him. Jake insisted, ignoring her plea. With each step, the chill grew more intense, pressing against his skin. Shadows flitted alongside him, growing thicker with each downward movement, crawling closer. The whispers transformed into a chorus, chanting, Jake, leave, now. No. He shouted, his voice rising above the storm. You can't have him. Suddenly, the ground beneath him gave way, a vast pit filled with the cries of children echoing off unseen walls. Jake stumbled, clutching the edge of the trapdoor, fighting to maintain his balance as panic surged through him. Jake! Lisa screamed, fear lacing every syllable. Jake felt a brush against his arm. A chilling touch, ice cold and clammy. He jerked back, spinning around, but there was nothing. The shadows danced just beyond the reaches of the dim light, their laughter melding into the haunting echoes of despair. Then, a voice sweet and soft, cut through the chaos. Jake, over here. It sounded like Mark. Heart hammering, Jake squinted into the darkness, desperately searching for the source. As hope ignited in his chest, the shadow responded, shifting like smoke, forming a figure in the gloom. This wasn't Mark. It was something else entirely, something with hollow eyes and a chilling smile. Join us, It crooned, its voice laced with malice. Play with us forever. The last of Jake's resolve crumbled, terror clenched his throat tight as he turned to Lisa. We need to go now. But the shadows closed in, a choking void trapping them. Just as he felt the air thickening, the figure lunged forward, and the room spiraled into chaos. With darkness swirling around him, Jake reached for Lisa, but she was pulled away, swallowed by the shadows. Jake! Her voice erupted, and then it was gone. As the world blurred around him, Jake stumbled back against the trapdoor, his eyes searching for escape. Would he join Lisa in the abyss, or could he fight back against the horror? And then, as the giggles turned into a cacophony of screams, everything went black. What awaited him on the other side of the shadows? Jake's eyes shot open, but he couldn't see. Thick, suffocating darkness enveloped him, swallowing all sense of direction. Panic clawed at him as he gasped for air, the smell of damp earth and decay filling his nostrils. Where had Lisa gone? Where was Mark? Lisa! He screamed, hoping against hope that his voice would break through the veil of shadow. The silence that followed was deafening. Heart racing, he forced himself to stand, his legs unsteady beneath him. Each trembling step felt like a leap into the unknown, the ground beneath a void of treachery. Mark? He whispered, every syllable coming out hoarse, weighed down by dread. There was a shift in the darkness. He heard it before he saw it, a rustling sound that sent ice coursing through his veins. He thought about retreating, but the thought of abandoning Mark, of letting shadows consume him too, scorched through his resolve. Stay together, he muttered to himself, the words barely coherent. He positioned himself against a crumbling wall, its jagged surface rough against his back. The walls felt like they were closing in, the air growing thicker, as if the very darkness itself was intent on suffocating him. Then came that laugh again, twisting around him like a ghastly melody. It rang out, sweet and taunting, that same ghastly giggle that hinted at misery and despair. Memories flickered Mark's face, his bright eyes. Would he really give up? No. Each laugh only made Jake more stubborn, more determined to find his friend. Where are you? He roared into the blackness, the sound reverberating in the enclosed space. In response, the laughter faded, leaving an eerie stillness. But then, a faint cry pierced the quiet, a child's voice, laced with panic and sorrow. It chilled him to the bone. Jake! Help! Mark! He shouted, heart racing again as he bolted toward the sound. Each step was like pulling against a raging river, shadows reached out like grasping hands, threatening to drag him under. He stumbled forward, driven by urgency, until he collided with something solid, a door, weathered and ancient, its wood damp against his palm. Gritting his teeth, he twisted the handle, praying it would give. It creaked open just enough to reveal a sliver of light. Beyond that light, he could hear the cries growing clearer, desperate and broken, echoing through the clammy air. He pushed through the door and stepped into a room, an old, decrepit cellar filled with toys strewn about like discarded memories. The flickering light of a dying bulb cast long shadows that danced ominously along the walls. Mark! There was no answer, just more cries. Something deep inside sparked a new light of urgency. He whipped around, scanning the room. There it was in the corner. In the dim glow, a small figure crouched, shoulders hunched, rocking back and forth. Jake's heart pounded in a wild rhythm as he raced toward it. Mark! He cried out again, his voice breaking with hope, but as he drew closer, his heart sank. The figure didn't look like Mark at all. It was a child, a girl with hollow eyes and a vacant expression. Her lips curled into a grin that was far too wide for comfort. Play with us, she said, her voice echoing with the same haunting lilt he'd heard before. The shadows trembled around her as if they were alive, wrapping around her small frame like a cloak of despair. Where's Mark? Jake demanded, furious, desperate to shake the dread that settled in his stomach. Lost, she replied, her grin now tinged with something darker. He's one of us now. Just like me. A cold dread flooded over him as he took a step back, recognizing the faint whisper of familiar laughter in the air, a sound he never wanted to hear again. He was being pulled toward the same fate. He could feel the shadows reaching out, urging him to join their macabre play. To surrender like Lisa had. But then, a glimmer caught his eye, a flash of red. A small object left behind among the debris. His pulse quickened as he recognized it, Mark's old baseball cap, barely visible beneath a mass of broken toys. In that moment, Jake knew he had to make a decision. Would he risk everything to save Mark, or was he destined to remain trapped in this waking nightmare forever? As the dark whispers grew louder, Jake lunged forward toward the cap, ready to fight for his friend. But the shadows writhed, thickening around him, trying to pull him back. Could he pull Mark back from the brink before it was too late? Jake's heart thundered in his chest as he grasped Mark's cap, its familiar weight grounding him in a storm of chaos. The girl's haunting laughter echoed around him, twisting his resolve. "He's ours now," she teased, her eyes glinting like shards of glass. The shadows writhed, hungry to claim him next. Sweat dripped down his back as he clenched the cap tightly, pulling himself closer to that flicker of hope, a sign that Mark was still somewhere within reach. "Mark!" He cried out again, fighting against the tightening grip of darkness. He could feel the chilling arms of oblivion clawing at his skin, but he refused to let despair drown him. "I'm coming for you. I won't leave you behind." With that, he summoned every ounce of strength and ran deeper into the room, fueled by love, desperation, and the unwavering promise to save his brother. Shadows loomed larger, swirling ferociously as he moved. Jake pushed through with determination, fighting the pressure that threatened to crush him. The flickering light overhead shimmered in and out, reflecting the recurrence of laughter and cries echoing all around him, feeding into his panic. "Let him go!" he shouted into the void, his voice a fierce declaration. The laughter twirled around like a sickly lullaby, but he pressed on. No game, no echo of illusion could deceive him now. He finally spotted a sliver of light at the end of the room, pulsing with an urgency that matched his heartbeat. As he raced towards it, something shifted behind him. A dark figure swooped past, claws grasping. He ducked, narrowly avoiding a grasp. Fueled by adrenaline, he soared forward, driven by hope and fear tangled like the shadows around him. "Mark! I need you to answer me. Where are you?" he called, his voice raw. Just ahead, the glow brightened, illuminating a small door barely ajar. Heart pounding, he flung it open. It led to a narrow staircase spiraling up, the air crisp and welcoming with the scent of earth. "Mark!" he shouted, pounding up the stairs. With every step, the darkness retreated, shrinking back into the depths he'd just escaped. Bursting into the daylight, he almost tripped but steadied himself. The open air filled his lungs, and for a split second, it was blissful until his eyes searched desperately. The cul-de-sac loomed around him, eerily silent, shadows still lingering, but wait there. A figure crouched in the shadows of the Johnson house, terror stretching across his features. It was Mark. Heart racing, Jake rushed toward him and dropped to his knees. "Mark!" Mark looked up, eyes wide and glassy, his voice a trembling whisper. "Jake, I thought you'd left me." Panic clutched at Jake's chest as he pulled Mark into a tight embrace, flooding with relief. "Never. We need to get out of here, now." He could feel the weight of their horror, a sinking truth that was both a relief and a grief born from the shadows they had just unleashed. Behind them, the door they had escaped from slammed shut with a ground-shaking force, accompanied by an agonized howl of despair from the figure cloaked in darkness. The children's laughter faded into haunting echoes on the wind. The shadows pushed against the edges of the light, desperate to reclaim what they lost. Without a second to lose, Jake dragged Mark by the hand, racing through the cul-de-sac toward their home. The reality of what they defaced sunk in like ice water. They had merely scratched the surface of dark truths bound to the Johnson family and the secrets buried deep within the neighborhood. But for now, escape was paramount. As they reached their house, the sun hung above them, golden and warm, and they fell onto the porch, gasping for breath, clutching each other as sobs mixed with laughter, relief flooding in like a sudden thaw after a bitter winter. "Did you see? It was horrible. I couldn't find you," Mark gasped, tears spilling down his cheeks. "Yeah," Jake whispered back, eyes wide. But they were together now, and that was the vital truth. Their hearts faltered, but they held on to hope. The shadows may have whispered their dark lullabies, but the radiant light of family would always prevail, and just like that, silence returned, weighing heavy in the air, yet filled with a newfound strength. They knew they would never forget what had transpired that night, nor would they leave it unexamined. The neighborhood, with all its lurking secrets, would need to be faced. That in unison, they turned toward the Johnson house, where the sunlight hit the windows, glinting like shards of hope against the veil of darkness around them. Secrets would unravel, horrors faced. But there would be healing, too. Together, they were strong. Jake squeezed Mark's shoulder, a silent promise that they would uncover the truth, but not alone. Because now, they had each other. They would carry their family's secrets forward, woven in courage instead of fear, ready to face whatever awaited. But one last thought echoed through Jake's mind as they looked back at the Johnson house, shadows retreating further. This was just the beginning. You need to subscribe now to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Smash that like button now to help feed the algorithm and support the community that keeps these tales alive. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this thrilling conclusion. Let us hear what you think. And wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see what happened next. Let us keep the stories flowing together.